Hello everyone, this is the latest official LEGO rendition of the Empire State Building in their architecture line. Over 1,700 pieces in this set. It is on a completely different level compared to the last two renditions of the Empire State Building that they did in official sets. The most recent one was just a miniature version that was included in the New York Skyline set, but they also did a standalone Empire State Building about 10 years ago, which was just tiny by comparison, just around 70 pieces for that one. So this is definitely on a different, just a different plane of existence practically, not only in its size, but also its complexity and level of intricacy of the building techniques. The height of this one is about 21.5 inches or 55 centimeters. There it is in comparison. I'll just line up a figure with the center line of it so you can see the relative general size. So it's pretty impressive, but it's not massive. It's not absolutely towering. With 1,700 pieces, almost 700 of those pieces are just 1x2 grills. So there's not a whole lot of bulk that goes into this, except there is quite a bit of mass. This is a very solid build. It's not hollow at all. In terms of how it looks as a completed model, well, it looks great. I mean, it looks practically like a proper scale model, and perhaps if you're not too familiar with Lego, you may even see this from a distance and not even realize that it's made of Lego. There are no exposed studs. I mean, you can kind of see the sides of some studs and things, but you know, it looks more like a model than many of even Lego's expert level and architecture sets in the past. It's really not that complex of a shape though, right? I mean, it really lends itself well to a rectangle-based, a block-based building system. But, I mean, you can clearly see, if you are a Lego fan, you can clearly see that there's a ton of studs on the side construction involved in this, mostly to get that outer skin. And certainly this is the correct decision, going with lots and lots of the grill pieces. They weren't as annoying to apply, I think, as they look, or at least as I expected. Yeah, I'm just looking at the instruction sheet here off screen. It's 684 exactly official grill pieces that are attached there. But there really isn't that much repetition. Yeah, applying those is repetitive, but there's not that much repetition in the build, far less than I expected, actually. There are a number of sub-assemblies that are done like twice. Like this section right here is done and you attach it from the side. This section is done and you attach it from the side. There are a few things that are done 4 times. One thing that's done 4 times for a vertical, just a vertical repeat to get the major center section of the tower. The sides, was it the sides or the front and back? I think it was the sides get attached. They're mirrored, they're identical actually. One here, and that's just one large subassembly each. But it just, I don't know, it just felt like a better build, a more interesting build than I expected for something that is so constrained by rectangles, by right angles everywhere. And you know, the studs on the side construction is not limited to just applying that outer skin. I mean, you can see that a lot of the sub-assemblies are fully built on their sides, and this makes some really interesting use, or quite a lot of use of a technique that I think Lego is trying to tell us through this build. They're just trying to tell us they like and they fully approve of. In case there was any question about it, this technique right here of placing a tile in between the studs of a brick or a plate. So they actually do this to invert studs a number of times, and in many places, if not all in this, it's not even really necessary. It provides some interesting structural support. If you're interested in what size that is, the height of 2 bricks plus 1 plate. But it's not like they use the anti-studs on top. They don't connect anything to that throughout this. It's almost as if they were just trying to send a message to us. It's a good technique. It fills up some space in an interesting way, leaves some interesting gaps for adding in things from the side. But in case there was any question, this is a perfectly legitimate technique that Lego has told us very directly they like, not only approve of, but actually like. Probably the most interesting stuff in terms of how it gets built is down at the lower level, the lowermost level, that is. And actually, most of it you don't even see. This actually has some interior detail that's designed into it. They actually have the escalators that are built in there, and you build them, you place them, and then you never see them again. So it's really something that's put there just for the builder. Nobody else is going to be able to appreciate those, and I think that's cool. It really didn't waste a lot of pieces for that. Definitely a fair amount of design effort had to go into creating that, but I kind of appreciate that as sort of an Easter egg that is specifically for the builders. You know, you have to put in the effort. And here's the page in the instructions where you can see them in place, and they also make a reference to them over there. But ultimately, all this gets covered up. And it's interesting how there's so little area here of studs on top. You know, it's a very large structure, but the number of studs that are exposed at this point to which things get attached is very minimal. Now, these tiles around the sides do receive some weight, but a lot of the structure ultimately gets its core support from its core, from its center. And while I'm talking about the core, and while we're looking at the instructions here, I do want to point out a very deliberate decision that was made during the design was to make the core red, white, and blue. Very, very USA patriotic right there. Completely unnecessary, but an understandable message, and another thing that can potentially be appreciated by the builder. There's more to it than this by far, but this is a good illustration of just how much color there really is on the inside. And I like that, especially the fact that you don't see any of that red, white, or blue at the end. I mean, it doesn't peek through anywhere on the finished product. The only place you do see bright color is down on the ground and on the streets in particular, where they have some suggestions of some taxis going around the outside, and they do give you the street all the way around. So this is not something that needs to be displayed, in one particular direction from one particular angle. You don't really need to choose where you're going to put this, how you're going to display it when you build it. It looks equally good from truly any angle. And then at the end, the very tip of it, of course, is a very different build. They give us some plated or painted silver pieces there. That's nice to see, to give it a little extra shine. Always a luxury, to get that little bit of deluxe, not only just the metallic finish of it, but a little bit different texture. It has that satin finish compared to the fairly glossy finish of regular Lego plastic pieces. So that works out well, and this is very symmetrical all the way around, with studs on the side construction, of course, and ultimately studs on every side construction. But it has a nice little core inside, so this is not it's not fragile at all, and yeah, it just makes for a nice topper. Real quick, here are the set's spare parts, the leftovers. There aren't very many of them, especially considering how many parts there are in the set in total, and nothing here is too special. At this point, I suppose I could talk about the history of New York City and metropolitan architecture in general, but those are things that I personally don't have a great interest in, so I'm not going to just look up a bunch of facts just to pad out the video. I think that I've covered everything that I wanted to cover regarding this. I mean, most of what you want to know about it, you can see right here, but I can tell you what I feel about its value, having actually gone through the process of building it and having the thing right here in front of me. The price to part ratio on this set is fantastic. You cannot ask for it to be better. And I'm glad that it is that way, because 684 is a lot of 1x2 by 1/3 pieces, just the grill pieces. So if this had a 10-cent price to part ratio, that would be insane. It would be ridiculously expensive. As it is, it does feel still a bit expensive for its overall size, but the quality is definitely there. The display value is definitely there. This has lasting value. This is something that you can just leave on display, and it's not going to be superseded by anything in the next decade, possibly multiple decades. At some point they may come out with maybe a half-height version of this with future pieces that will look really nice and detailed, or maybe something that's twice as large as this. But for its size, it's just so good. And like I said, fortunately, the building experience was much better than I expected. It's actually enjoyable to put together. It's not boring to me. Has some interesting techniques, and it just feels right. So I think that there's nothing really that can be done to make this better, in my opinion. And I think that the price is high, but relative to other architecture sets, in the official architecture line, it's very good. And I think ultimately for a lot of people, it would be worth it. And again, keep in mind its size and scale, which is pretty impressive. It's not going to work well with minifigures if you're into minifigure level stuff. It's going to look like not a scale model, like maybe just a temporary installation. I don't know. I don't think it works too well with minifigures unless you put it off in the background. But that's pretty much all that I have to say about this one. If you want to see how it actually goes together yourself, you can watch it. You can watch the full build, the pure build, in real time with no distracting music, nothing sped up, and nothing cut out except for a couple minutes, literally a couple minutes out of the roughly 2.5 hour build where I just messed up and didn't record a couple of tiny little sub-assemblies. My apologies for that. But most of it is there. But if you don't want to go through the entire process, you just want to see it in general, I have the much shorter version as a speed build, time-lapse style, 60p, fairly smooth, hopefully, with some music to go with it. And that lets you go through and just, see how everything ultimately comes together. Choose one of those if you would like to. I'll put up links to both on the screen right now. I'll talk to you again soon.